There is a fascinating and disturbing exclusive story from Mother Jones. And the story is that Fox News propagandist Tucker Carlson's recent pro-Putin propaganda is so pleasing to Putin, it's so pleasing to Russia, that the Kremlin wrote a memo which Mother Jones has obtained. And the memo is the Kremlin directing Russian media to regularly feature Tucker Carlson's content. Now, in a sense, this is perfectly logical. We've been covering for 2 weeks now Tucker Carlson's sort of soft pro-Putin apologia and casting doubt on Ukraine and its leader in ways that are slightly more subtle than just coming out and saying Putin's great, right? I mean, that's not what Tucker is doing. But it's still propaganda so useful to the Kremlin that the Kremlin has noticed and is saying, let's regularly translate and use Tucker Carlson clips on Russian state media. When the enemy sees you as a sort of collaborator, in a sense, you should really step back and think about what it is that you are putting out there. Let's take a look at a little bit of this memo. Again, this is a great story, great investigative work by David Korn and Mother Jones. Leaked Kremlin memo to Russian media. It is, quote, essential to feature Tucker Carlson. The Russian government has pressed outlets to highlight the Fox host's Putin helping broadcasts. There's even a quote from the memo, which says, it is essential to use as much as possible fragments of broadcasts of the popular Fox News host Tucker Carlson, who sharply criticizes the actions of the United States and NATO, their negative role in unleashing the conflict in Ukraine, and the defiantly provocative behavior from the leadership of the Western countries and NATO towards the Russian Federation and towards President Putin personally. This is a 12-page document written in Russian. It sums up Carlson's position. Russia is only protecting its interests and security. The memo even includes a quote from Tucker. And how would the U.S. behave if such a situation developed in neighboring Mexico or Canada? Now, what's missing from that analysis, as we've talked about before, is actually different. It's been, wait a second, for these people that are doing the soft Putin apologia, how would they suggest or imagine the U.S. would react if Mexico or Canada started doing what Russia is doing? And I think it's really important not to get sucked into some of what we sometimes call these philosophical black holes or rhetorical propaganda devices. Imagine, because go back to how Putin justified the start of this invasion. Putin's entire premise was, listen, I mean, in Crimea back in 2014, more recently, when 2 weeks ago at the start of this, Putin recognized the independence of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Imagine if Mexico said, I don't know, we're sitting here on the border to the U.S., we're in Mexico, and we're looking over at Arizona, and we're looking at California, and we're looking at Texas. We see a lot of people who look like us, Mexican Americans. We hear a lot of people who speak our language, Spanish. And some of them, allegedly, want to be part of Mexico. So we recognize the independence of those areas. I don't know, border towns, pick a border town. We recognize the independence of Juarez or whatever. And, just because we don't feel that the Mexican Americans are being treated that well, we're going to send some tanks over, as an example. So the idea here of if we were Russia and Mexico and Canada did what Ukraine is doing, how would we react? But it completely ignores the similar thought experiment, which you could say is valid or not because the circumstances in Russia and Ukraine are different anyway. But it ignores the analogous situation of, well, what if the U.S. were Ukraine and Canada and or Mexico started behaving like Putin has been in Russia? That one they don't want to talk about. So needless to say, Tucker Carlson's show has become the sort of thing you would kind of expect to see on what I would call soft Russian state media, the stuff that's not like overtly the dictates of the Kremlin, but doing apologia for it. You see a lot of folks associated with the left, although it's not really clear why they're still associated with the left. Glenn Greenwald is an example, Jimmy Dore and others, increasingly appearing with Tucker Carlson and doing what sort of appears to be a bipartisan apologia, when really what we're talking about here is these are angry contrarian grifters. Tucker Carlson, I don't even know if he believes any of this stuff. Tucker Carlson's expertise is weaponizing the ignorance of his audience with contrarian, reactionary rhetoric made to make people afraid or feel like they're questioning the official narrative in a way that makes sense. And of course, questioning the official narrative is a beautiful thing. It's called epistemology, critical thinking, media literacy, evaluating why we believe the things we believe. But these folks have really become the prototypical example of useful idiots. Now, when I say useful idiot, I don't want to use the term idiot as a pejorative. Useful idiot as a term has a very specific meaning, which is a useful idiot is someone who ends up propagandizing for a cause without fully comprehending the cause's goals or that they are even necessarily doing it. And then they end up being cynically used by the leaders of the cause. I mean, by the definition of useful idiot, it is impossible to argue that Tucker Carlson is not a useful idiot here. In this case, Tucker is propagandizing for Putin, whether he realizes it or not. That's the beauty of the term. He doesn't matter. He may not realize it. He may just be saying, what's going to fire up my audience? The same way at one point it was claiming the FBI did the January 6th riots. Does Tucker really believe that? I don't know. But he's targeting his audience for ratings and to kind of keep this persona of, I'll tell you what's really going on. And that propagandizing for Russia is being cynically used by the Kremlin, which we now know because of this memo. And I don't know if the right wingers who watch Tucker find themselves in a pickle. You know, you either stand by Tucker and you end up sort of softly supporting Putin, or you have to reject the guy that you believed was giving you the truth all along. So quite the cognitive dissonance that they must be experiencing. And in fact, the next segment is going to be about exactly the type of pro-Putin conspiratorial apologia that we've been seeing from Tucker Carlson. One of our longtime sponsors is Monk Pack, giving you 20% off Monk Pack's keto nut and seed bars, which taste just like your favorite sweet snacks, but without the guilt, because they have only 1 gram of sugar, 2 to 3 net carbs, and 150 calories. A great snack if you're doing keto, if you're doing low carb, and if you just want a low sugar snack. I love the Monk Pack nut and seed bars. Great balance of sweet and salty, satisfyingly crunchy, soft and chewy. Because I like these so much, I use Monk Pack's subscription feature, sends them straight to my house on a regular basis, and saves me 10%. If you don't love Monk Pack as much as I do, they will refund you all your money. I think there's a really good chance Monk Pack nut and seed bars become your favorite go-to snack. Monk Pack is giving you 20% off your first order. Go to monkpack.com and enter the code PACMAN at checkout.